Stories is in with a little bit of shit. She's telling you how her life is on her. She is reminiscing how fun it was. Yeah, the light has disappeared, leaving place to the dark. She has her words feeling deep inside, hoping for the best of the land she loves. Yeah, dressed in the same robe, just like the same world, working on the same goal. You're calling her full over the right times, dressed in the same role, just like one world, carrying the same goal. Stop calling her fool, be a helper. There gotta be a way to make it better. Gotta be a way for better. There gotta be a way to be less anger. It's getting to a point to build together. Quand je l'écoute et prends enfin conscience de ces mots, on peut y voir des cas désespérants, et peut y voir des cas encourageants. Yeah. Une parabole qui s'érige au-delà de ces mots. Elle croit encore positivement, met en œuvre tout ce qu'elle a entièrement. Yeah. Vêtue de colère, confronter la mer, faire face aux galères. Impossible n'aura plus d'emprise sur elle. Vêtue de colère, offrir un bel air, faire face aux galères. Impossible n'aura plus d'emprise sur elle. There gotta be a way to make it better. There gotta be a way for better. There gotta be a way to be less anger. It's getting to a point to build together. To build together. To build together.
Good evening. Thanks for coming out. That song that you just listened to was written and recorded by a friend of mine in Fredericton. About a year ago, I asked him to write a song about the situation we're in when it comes to housing. And he's actually, some of us here know Chris Fleming, who failed at his first attempt to teach me French. Success the second time, sort of. This gentleman was my French teacher last year at UMB. And I came home after my first class. I said to my wife, my French teacher's got kind of that Seal vibe, you know, the singer Seal? And so that was after my first class, and I went back after the second class. And he said, yeah, I write music. And he's like R&B and hip hop. So after my second class, I said, dude, you gotta write a song for me. 2 weeks later, he came out with that. And I asked him to do it bilingual, and he just got it. So he launched that last year. So great guy. And Phil Collins, you know the song Another Day in Paradise? Kind of ends very depressing, and we couldn't get the rights from Phil. So here we are. Anyway, before we go any further, I'd like to introduce Robert Tinker from Charlotte County Housing Council to go to that mic for 2 minutes, introduce himself, as well as Jim Stewart from Neighborhood Works, just to go to that mic and just give a 2-minute introduction about who you are and what you do, and then we'll start with the presentation.
My name is Robert Tinker. I'm coordinator for Charlotte County Housing. We've been in existence for over 35 years. I've been coordinator for the past 16 years, and before that I was a volunteer on the board. I worked for a cabinet minister in Brunswick for 9 years in the Department of Municipalities, Culture and Housing, which is now Housing New Brunswick, and also Department of Income Assistance, which is now Social Development. So I've been around for a while dealing with these sort of things. And so we have apartments in 4 communities: St. Stephen's, St. Andrews, St. George, and Blacks Harbour. We will be selling tickets outside of the store here to the left on the way out. They're raffle tickets. They're $10 a piece, with a chance to win half the proceeds at the end of the month. So thank you for coming.
Thank you. Jim,
Yeah, I'm Jim Stort, and I'm the Executive Director of Neighborhood Works. Neighborhood Works, by another name, has been providing solutions for children, youth, and their families for the past 40 years. Since 1985, that's when I first got involved. We opened our first group home, and we've served the most vulnerable, again, for the past 40 years. And to date, that one home has serviced more than 800 youth. Let's see, in 2021, we purchased 59 Union Street, the old Catholic church. That's now our head office. The main reason why we purchased that was to open transitional housing for youth 15 to 25, 22 at the time, but now the new Child Service Act has moved up, so it's 25. We also want to make a multi-generational service hub, kind of a one-stop shop for services. A couple of stats that you may not know, I'm not sure if you're going to cover them, but in Charlotte County, 19% of all youth under the federal youth number 15 to 29 are in NEETs, which is not an education, employment, or training situation. So if you're looking at kind of that barrier and to homelessness is 1 in 5 individuals. 40% of children that are in care in the province are 40% of our homeless population. Just recently, we've had the privilege to open the Lighthouse Lodge in St. Stephen at the old Masonic Hall on 9 Main Street. From December to April, it will be an out of the hub, and then come May, it'll become a shelter. It has meals, it's open 24/7, laundry, showers, outreach, support, and encouragement. As we move forward, we'll have spaces for other services like addiction and mental health. NWI believes in the housing first model. Everyone, regardless of where they're at, should have the right to housing. Shelters are not the solution. It's kind of the downstream approach. We just keep dragging people out of the river and they move back upstream, fall back in the river. So housing is the number one need that we have. If you have your housing and maybe some meals, then you can start working on other things. So we also have, we talked about youth transitional housing. Hopefully it's going to open in spring. We have an outreach worker, youth outreach for diversion from homelessness into housing. We offer a youth launch program, which is a skills-based program for 15 to 29 that fall under the NEETs, as I talked about. We have free community suppers. These, it's Tuesdays and Thursdays. It's for everyone, free of charge. It just might help a young mom to be able to keep the lights on or buy diapers. Since July, we have served over 50,000 meals up to 2021. We've served over 50,000 meals. So then, where's the last one? So the last thing that I want to tell you is that if you want to combat homelessness, you want to shut down the scourge of each community, which are shelters or out of the cold, then what I encourage you to do is to support and fight for housing for everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. So thank you everyone for coming out tonight again. My name is Peter Corbyn, proud 1981 graduate of Sir James Dunn. I find it kind of hilarious that the two teachers I had in grade 12, Brian Dixon and Chris Fleming, who I think were responsible for starting this station, would get a kick out of the fact that I'm here because I had my 2 lowest grades with those 2 teachers. I'm the executive director of the New Brunswick Nonprofit Housing Association. So I'll just go back quickly. So I'll introduce us in a second. So this presentation will take about an hour. It's broken into 8 chapters or 9 chapters. After we go through the presentation, we will do a question and answer period for a few minutes. So there will be an opportunity for some two-way conversation with that microphone. So first of all, I'd like to introduce the New Brunswick Nonprofit Housing Association, as well as the inspiration for what I'm doing here today and why I love my job. We'll start with some really boring stuff like a glossary. A lot of people hear a lot of terms around affordable housing and market and non-market and community housing. So I'd just like to start off with some terms to identify different types of housing. So when I use those terms throughout the presentation, they kind of sync. So market housing is essentially housing that's developed and provided by a private enterprise or for-profit entities. That's market housing. Non-market housing is community housing, non-profit, co-op, public, so any kind of housing that is not private, we call that non-market. And we use terms like community housing interchangeably with non-market, public, non-profit, and such. So that's community housing or non-market housing. A term that many people have a hard time understanding, and even those of us in the sector have a hard time describing what affordable housing is. The simplest way to define it, as well as how CMHC defines it, is affordable housing is where someone does not have to pay more than 30% of their gross income on housing. Basically, that's it. So depending on your income, affordable housing could be, if you make $1 million a year, $300,000 could be affordable. If you make $10,000 a year, all you can afford is $3,000 a year. So affordable housing, for the sake of definition, would be 30% of your gross income. We've all heard of the term NIMBYism, not in my backyard. We're going to have a chapter here called the YIMBYism, yes, in my backyard. So we're going to flip that term. So a quick introduction into the New Brunswick Nonprofit Housing Association. We've been around for 33 years. I've been the executive director for about 1.5 years now. I spent the last 5 years building affordable housing units around the province, about 100 in total. And before that, I spent 15 years in the auto industry. I taught for 4 years at the community college in St. John. I was a partner in an IT company for almost 10 years, and about 10 years ago, I got into consulting, and about 6-7 years ago into housing. I love what I do. I love my job. I just love this work. So the New Brunswick Nonprofit Housing Association, we have about 170 members around the province. They can range in size from a nonprofit that owns a duplex to a few hundred units. So we're very broad in range and size. We own, our members, I should say, own and operate about 6,500 units around the province. And those are for low-income seniors, low-income families, low-income single adults. Here is a piece of information that really inspires one of the reasons why we're doing this outreach like this, other than the education piece and outreach. Of those 170 nonprofit organizations, on average, we have between 5 and 8 board members per organization. So that's roughly 1,000 volunteers in our sector that have been on boards for a very long time in the nonprofit housing sector and communities right around the province. We did a survey of our members last May, and we found out 2 things. Number one, of those roughly 1,000 individuals, about 65% of them are 60 and over, 25% of them are in their 70s, and 6% are in their 80s. 40% of them would like to retire from their boards in the next 1 to 3 years. So that means we're going to be short about 400 volunteers around the province in the next 1 to 3 years. And every one of them that says, I'd like to retire, say to me, good luck finding new volunteers. Everyone around will tell you that. So one of our challenges is ensuring the sustainability of the sector. So those blue dots represent the communities we're in the province, about 115 communities around the province. So you've driven past nonprofit housing around this province every day of your life. You may not have known it, but they're everywhere. So that is the Association of Nonprofit and Co-op Housing Organizations. We have an annual conference. Every year we get about 200 people. There's a couple of examples of types of housing we build, and we have regional meetings and such, so we get a lot of work done. About a year ago, I got inspired to create this presentation. This is the fourth of these types. I did the first one at the Playhouse in Fredericton last April. And there were sort of three inspirations for creating the presentation you're going to see now. One is seniors and baby boomers, which most of us are the same now. Anyone 60 to 78 is a boomer, and well, a senior, especially I am now when I go to Shoppers Drug Mart on Thursday night, so I qualify. You'll see a little later why seniors and boomers inspire me to do what we're doing. So that's number one. Number two, I had the honor and privilege of standing on the stage 18 years ago. For those that may remember, back in 2006, Al Gore, the former Vice President of the United States, created a documentary called The Inconvenient Truth about the climate crisis. Well, in late 06 and early 07, he committed, and he did, to train 1,000 people to do that presentation that's in his documentary in their community. I was the first of 21 Canadians to get that training in 2007. I then came back in January of 2007. In 5 months, I ended up doing that presentation in Inconvenient Truth 55 times for 12,000 people around Atlantic Canada to spread the word about the climate crisis. Now, one of the benefits that I've learned and been inspired by what Al Gore did with The Inconvenient Truth is back then, and especially now, people would not typically go to see a movie or a presentation. They weren't necessarily concerned about that particular topic. But when we went out and talked to Canadians and Americans in the States and such, we were talking to people like students and conferences and such, and a lot of people were learning about the climate crisis who otherwise would not be there to learn about it. So long story short, since then, more than 1 million Canadians have sat in on one of those presentations because it's done at the community level and not necessarily on Netflix or YouTube today. So about a year ago, thinking, okay, what Al Gore did for the climate crisis, we're going to start for the housing crisis, because we are in a housing crisis. No question, we're in a housing crisis. So more people need to know and understand what's going on and what we can do to help fix it. So that was inspiration number two. Inspiration number three, you see this young gentleman here sitting on the street. That's actually in Fredericton. And about 2 years ago, a year and a half ago, I was talking to a young person who was housed through an organization in Moncton called Rising Tide. And I walked out of a building she just moved in about 3 or 4 months earlier, and we had a conversation. We looked in each other's eyes and we connected. And she was telling me that 3 months ago she was living on the street. And we had a conversation for about 20 minutes, and I walked away, and a shiver went down my spine. I went, I can't believe this. We made eye contact, and the reason why I knew it is because that person had a home. And I would like to challenge everyone here to think about this. Every time you walk past someone that's living on the street in your communities, do you stop to talk to them? Do you make eye contact? If you know they're housed, you probably do. If they're not, you probably don't. And that just inspired the heck out of me, and you're going to see some of their stories here tonight. Here's the first one. Jamie Wilson, he is housed now. You're going to listen to this gentleman for about 2 minutes.
I was born into a life of drugs and criminality and drug dealing. My earliest memories are raids. That's like my earliest memories, like being in seeing cops. In and out, I've been in. I probably got 23 years done solid, and I'm 50 years old now. So in and out, out for 2 or 3 months. Sometimes only 1 month. maybe a year the max out of all my life, the year. So now I've been out 2 years and like 5 months, 2.5 years now. I've never had the help with all the things you need and to be normal, because I was institutionalized and criminalized, right? So I didn't know how to do my ID. I didn't know how to do this. I don't know how to do all that stuff, you know. So it was good to have the support, the community support, and a caseworker, and you know, building, you know, like helping and that way I felt I was okay, like I wasn't alone. I had a few panic attacks, really bad ones, and you know, they helped. You know, I came over here one day and I had to run over, and you know, I mean, I was freaked out and stuff. But yeah, no, it's good like that.
Tell me where you live now, how long have you lived there, and
So-
how has that impacted your life since you moved in?
So now, so when I come into this place where you know, brand new, and you got caseworkers, and you know, I'm a peer support, and I had purpose. I had a lot of things that were making me feel good, right? Because you got like, you know, so it gives you, like I said, so you get like the housing, community support, purpose. You get all those 4 things. There's one more thing I was missing. You get them all, and your chances of success of that is really good.
Right.
So that's what they did for me. Give me all the opportunities, right? And because I was trying more. The more, so I tell people, oh, they don't do this. I said, but I said they only help people who are going to help themselves. They're not going to help you if you're not ready. You're not going to help yourself. You're not going to. You know, it's up to you, really, more or less, right? Because so the help is there, and with the place, with the Rising Tide and the Harvest House together, and the NB Housing, so my rents, like, you know, so everything's all taken care of. I got everything, like all my IDs. You got somebody to talk to if you need to. The guys have somebody to reach out to. They have me also. I live next door to here. So yeah, it just gives you purpose.
That was Jamie in February of last year, so almost a year ago. We're going to meet Jamie again in November, a little later on. Chapter 2, 1940s to the 2040s, the burbs, policy, and population. How'd we get here? Well, let's go back to the 1940s. Some of us have seen these types of housing around Canada, Victory Housing, Strawberry Box, whatever you want to call it. Back in the 1940s, a house that small had 4.2 people in that household, back in the 40s and 50s. And back in the 60s, when we built the Brady Bunch house, we made the homes larger, and there were less people in them. 60s, we were down to 3.9 people per home. Then we got to the 1980s, and we're down to 2.9 people per home. So our homes are getting larger, and less people are living in them. So we're taking up more space for less people, creating urban sprawl. And then in the 2000s, we made them even larger, and we're down to 2.6 people per household. See a trend here? Fortunately, we're kind of shifting that a bit. Now we're down to about 2.4 people per household, and we're now starting to build them smaller. One of the reasons for that is boomers are saying out with the big house and with the new small one, if we can get them built soon enough. Cool story here. These are some garden homes that I built in Nakwik about 4 or 5 years ago. And neat little trivia here that I did not know until that day is in Nakwik, most of the streets are named after former lieutenant governors. And this development had a private lane, so the town council said, Peter, go find a name for this street. This is back when they're hauling all down the monuments to everyone back in the day. And I'm thinking, how am I going to pick a former lieutenant governor that doesn't have skeletons in their closet? So I called up Grady Nicholas, a living former lieutenant governor, and I asked him if we could name a street after him. He said, absolutely yes. So there's the unveiling. And then this is a 750 square foot home built for a couple in their 50s in Petitcodiac. So again, even smaller for 2 people. So we're starting to turn the corner on building smaller homes. This is a graph showing, I'm only going to show like 3 or 4 graphs, and the rest will be stories and pictures, but some data is kind of important here. So I'm going to share a little bit of data, but Basically, what you're looking at here is the contribution from the federal government from 1946 to 2018 in dollars for nonprofit and public housing. So there was a spike from the mid-60s to the late 1990s, then it was fairly dry for about 20 years, now it's been picking up again. So that is what's been happening, and those of us in the nonprofit sector are basically calling that a 30-year drought with respect to the amount of public funded housing. It is needed, and we'll share why. I'm only going to share one political slide here, and it's an observation. It's not a statement of political position, but I overlaid the prime ministers in the time of growth or decline of funding. So read into that what you will, but I just thought I'd do that for fun. So you can see where there were federal liberal governments and federal minus, Kim Campbell and Joe Clark and such. But anyway, there's a trend there. So really the heyday of nonprofit and public housing was the mid-60s to early 1990s. This will be relevant again in a couple of more slides. But more importantly, like we say with the climate crisis, this is a moral issue, not a political issue. This doesn't matter who's in power. At the end of the day, we need to provide housing for those less fortunate. This is why we should worry. This is another video. This is Margaret lives in Moncton, and this is about a 3-minute story about Margaret Imhoff in Moncton.
Margaret Imhoff frantically searches her phone for an affordable apartment for seniors in Greater Moncton, but it's coming up short.
And I'm not shy to say it. I hope I will not have to buy a tent because I have nowhere to go.
At 79, living on a limited income, the home where she currently lives is up for sale.
My income does not permit me to pay a big amount for rent.
Facing homelessness is having an impact on both her mental and her physical health.
You go to bed at night and you wake up and, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? What am I going to do? Where am I going to go? Like, it's scary. It really is.
But for many seniors like Margaret, there is hope within the walls of this former insurance building on St. George Boulevard in Moncton. Recently purchased by Rising Tide Community Initiatives, the 30,000 square foot brightly lit building will be converted into at least 30 affordable apartments for seniors.
People who run shelters tell us they're seeing more and more seniors at the shelters. More and more seniors are falling off that poverty cliff into homelessness. And so we know there are about 650 seniors on the NB housing wait list. So there's an increasing need to provide safe housing for seniors in the communities.
With their mandate to create 153 units for people who are unhoused being realized in 2025, Rising Tide is now spreading its wings to build affordable housing units. Renovations on this future seniors complex, with its large windows and open gathering space, will begin in February and cost roughly $8 million with the help of funding from all 3 levels of government. Coalition for Seniors Executive Director Cecile Casista.
I think Rising Tide is doing wonderful work, and I think it's something that we need to really dig into and actually work with them closely to see what we can do in other parts of the communities.
Seniors have done so much for our community and our society. They've paid their taxes, they've brought up families, they've contributed in so many ways. I just think it's the least that we can do as a community and as a not-for-profit to ensure that they have safe housing that they can afford in their later years.
What a relief that would be.
Shelley Steeves, CHCO-TV.
A couple of graphs here. Between 2005 and 2024, the average listed home in Canada went from $240,000 to $700,000. On an average growth, that's about 10% per year increase over the last 20-year period, 10% per year. At the same time, the median household income in 2005 was $53,635, and in 2020, the last census information or data, it was $73,000. An average annual increase of 2.4%. So that's a difference of 7.6% per year between income and housing cost. That's substantial. So as you can tell from that, more and more people are getting squeezed every day. Another contributor to especially New Brunswick, and we're all well aware our population has grown substantially in the last 4 or 5 years. I call it the New Brunswick population hockey stick. So from 1980 to 2019, the green line represents the actual population of the province of New Brunswick. The orange line represents the trend line for that period of time from 1987 to 2019. From 2019 to about a year ago, we added another 50,000 people to the population of the province. We added 50,000 people in 32 years, between 87 and 2019. Then we added 50,000 people in 3 years. Our population growth increased tenfold over the last 5 years. Now, it doesn't matter what widget you're selling, whether it's bananas or iPhones or cars, if demand for your product grows like that, good luck keeping up. That is a challenge. Big time challenge. That's why I call it a hockey stick, because of the growth here. So those of us in the housing sector, we are stressed out. Getting skilled trades, people to manage projects, you name it, it is a challenge. And one of the reasons for doing this is to help identify opportunities to help with that challenge. To put this in terms of New Brunswick communities, in the last, from 87 to 2019, New Brunswick was basically growing by the population of St. Andrews or Rishabukto. Since then, we've been growing by the same population as a Bathurst or at Edmundston. So picture for 35 years, we were adding the population of St. Andrews every year. Now we're adding the population of Bathurst every year. Where's the housing? I'm having a very difficult time keeping up. I promise this will be the last scary chart, then we'll look at pictures again and stories, but this is important data. What you're looking at here is data from Stats Canada. This is 2021 data from the census in 2021. It's from an organization called a project called the Housing Assessment Resource Project, HART for short. It's based at University of British Columbia, and they do a great job of taking Stats Canada data and turning it into information that's digestible. So in New Brunswick, and this is taken directly from Stats Canada. So in New Brunswick, in 2020, the median household income in 2021 was $70,000. So that means take a median household, your income $70,000. If you take 30% of that, you've got affordable shelter cost, again in 2020 dollars, of $1,762. So a median household in New Brunswick that's making $70,000, affordable housing is considered $1,762 a month. So that's the median. What's more relevant here are the low income, moderate income, median, and high income. So I'd like to just walk through these numbers just for a couple of minutes. So the lowest 20% of the population, or about 2% of the households in New Brunswick, earn less than $14,000 per year. That means they can only afford $350 a month in rent. How many people here are paying $350 a month in rent? I don't see any hands. Yeah. We'll get to the deficits in a minute. Low income, so the lowest 21 to 50% are basically to half the population, 16%. So that population's earning between $14,000 and $35,000. They can afford between $353 a month, and if a household's making $35,000, they can afford $880 a month for rent and utilities. The 50% to 80% of moderate income, another 20%, so that peaks at $56,000 household income. That's $1,400 a month for shelter. Then median income, or 81%, to basically 100. Households that make about 84 grand can afford about $2,000 a month. Here's the scary numbers out of that. As of 4 years ago, so we know this number has grown considerably because this is 4-year-old data. In New Brunswick, in 2021, we were short 4,400 units to provide housing for people making that much money in the province. So we were short 4,400. We were short 13,500 for households earning up to 35,000, and short 2,000 units for households earning up to 56,000. So basically, 4 years ago, we were short 20,000 units in New Brunswick to provide affordable housing for those income categories. And to take that down to Charlotte County, we're actually short right now in Charlotte County alone 700 units just in Charlotte County to provide affordable housing for households earning 35,000 or less. 700 just in Charlotte County, population 28,000. Some people in our sector would be familiar with this. It's called the housing continuum. This graphic is provided and developed by CMHC, the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, and it's a graphic to illustrate the housing continuum that basically describes the 8 different types of housing situation. Number 1, living outside or homeless. Number 2, living in short-term crisis support or emergency shelters. Number 3, transitional housing, which is meant to be a bridge or temporary housing. Number 4, low-income or subsidized housing. Number 5, affordable rental housing. So that is defined as a rental housing situation where that household is not paying, or is paying less than 30% of their gross income. Affordable home ownership, something like a Habitat for Humanity model where low-income families can actually afford to pay less than 30% of their income for home. And then market rental, so that's the market, private sector rental units, and home market home ownership. So I'll come back to this in a few minutes, but that's the housing continuum, and that's how we in our sector define and talk about each type of housing. Now, to make an analogy to cars, so we can build all the housing we want, but what we need to do is to build the appropriate housing for the appropriate people. So all of us can go out and say, I'd like to buy a Porsche for $135,000, or I'd like to buy a $40,000 Outback or a $17,000 Mitsubishi Mirage. But realistically, cars are no different than housing. There is a supplier for market housing and a housing that people can afford, those with a Porsche or a Subaru in the driveway. Then there's a percentage of housing providers that can provide housing that is more affordable for that lower percent income. So we are all part of this in providing housing. What we need to do collectively is to develop the appropriate housing for the appropriate households and individuals. Social isolation to social capital. I'm going to share another story here with a gentleman. You okay to get up and say hi? Please do. Anthony Hall.
That's a trigger.
It is. Sorry. I'll untrigger in a second. Anthony Hall's a great dude. We had a chat last week. This is his story.
My name's Anthony Hall. I'm an addict. But 14 years ago, I got my life plate overloaded with a series of events that within a year drove me to drug addiction. When I had lost everything due to drug addiction with couch surfing and being homeless, I discovered Neighborhood Works, and Amanda Grucci was an outreach worker there. She gave me some hope, and that's where I started my recovery. And then within a 2-year period, I went to a detox, and then to a program where I got sober. and got everything back now. With my life back, my dignity. And it started with, the main thing was housing. It's like being lost in the woods with no fire. Once you get fire going, it's hope. And once I got the housing and situated there, then it started to branch out, and I started to gather my life back together. But it took till Amanda to help me and to show me, there is hope. I started to realize that this is how I used to be. I'm going to stay that way, and be that better person, especially for my kids, because I had to throw them out of my life because I was embarrassed and ashamed of who I'd become, because I hadn't been this way all my life, but I had become, and it was a lot of people that I had lied to, tried to fool them. But a lot of people, when I come good and made an amends and healed or fixed these bridges that I'd burned, a lot of them said that I wasn't fooling them. But
Right.
When you're an addict, you think you're the smartest person in the world, but you're not.
Would you say because of housing you have your life back and your family back?
I have my life back. I'm working on the family thing.
Right on.
I am, I'm reaching out, but that I also need to heal my traumas, and that way I can have the tools to recognize that this is a better way of life, right? And yes, housing's on the top 10. It's the foundation of being free,
Right
and being
In a good place.
in a good place.
Right on. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I appreciate
Thank
it.
you.
Anthony, thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here. What I would love to see with presentations like this across the country is for more and more people to share their story and their experience, because I think it's really important that those of us who have not been in that situation understand how and why you get there, and understand how and why you get out. And you'll notice in the interview with Jamie, you'll notice on the wall there was a painting with the word hope. That was by design, and you mentioned the word hope 3 or 4 times. We have to give everyone, especially in this country, Canada, hope. We all have to have hope.
If you take hopeless and you take the last of the hopeless, you got hope.
Big time. Did you hear that? Yep. Right on. Thank you. Thank you. In putting this presentation together, I challenged myself to do it in just a few minutes. You're not sitting here for 3 or 4 hours. I looked for sources to actually share how we can best communicate what's needed in order to communicate the challenges that are out there. And this was a quote from a gentleman in Australia, and he wrote, if we want to stop people dying on roads, we invest money in seatbelts, not in the emergency department. In the same way regarding homelessness, why would we wait to intervene with a young person when they're in crisis, when we can intervene early and keep them at home and in school and engaged? We've got to stop chasing our tail and provide homes for everyone. It's as simple as that. That's my handwriting on a Post-it note about a year ago. The reasons for homelessness are as many as the number of people experiencing it. Rising Tide is an organization that some of you may have heard about in the media. It's a nonprofit that started about 3 years ago, and they received $15 million from 3 levels of government to build 150 units for formerly unhoused people, and they've hit their target, and they're actually adding more now, as you saw in that previous video. And about a year ago, I was talking to one of the individuals that works at Rising Tide, and he said that, and I said, can I please write that down? I wrote it down on a Post-it note. You can see the factors that lead to homelessness on the right-hand side. You can read them. But basically, everyone that has this experience is not there for the same reason. They're there for different reasons, and they're there because something happened in their life. And every single individual in that situation has a different story as to why they got there, and they did not ask for that. They did not ask to be on the street. They did not ask for that. I'm going to tone it down from the passion for a moment to another number. A study was completed across Canada between 2009 and 2011, so this is now 14 years old, and done in Vancouver, Winnipeg, Toronto, Montreal, and Moncton. There were about 1,000 participants. And basically what the study concluded, and this is in 2011 dollars, you can imagine how much more this is now, but in 2011, the cost to the taxpayer, as you can see with a list on the right-hand side of the screen, is the cost per person living on the street in 2011. In that study, was about $53,000 per year to the taxpayer. We can house people much less than $53,000 a year in 2011 dollars. That's probably closer to 80 or 90 grand is my guess. So it costs a whole lot less to the taxpayers to house someone and to help them than it does to chase them around with those different services. It costs substantially less. Some of you may remember Maslow's hierarchy of needs from Psychology 101 back in the day. No different. As Jim mentioned earlier, the Housing First model, which kind of scaled up in Finland a few years ago, basically is a simple concept. Give someone a home first, and then once they've got that home, they can start getting help, helping themselves and having people help them. To know that you can wake up with the same four walls around you and a roof over your head every single day helps someone on their track to improving their life. No different than Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The very bottom, psychological needs, shelter. It's the exact same thing. We've got to stop running around in circles. Let's do something to get housing in place for everyone that doesn't have housing now. It should not be that difficult. Which gets us to NIMBYism. Yes, in my backyard. I'm going to read a letter. So I'm going to have my back turned to you for 4 or 5 minutes, and I apologize for that, but I will read this. And this is a letter that was written by someone that lives in Moncton. And about 3.5 years ago, this organization, Rising Tide, a nonprofit, purchased an old Victorian home in part of the town that was a little questionable. So back in 2020, a couple, and actually they called the letter, Finally Peace and Quiet After Living Hell on Church Street. So this is a letter that was written to Dale Hicks, who is the president of Rising Tide in Moncton. And there's two parts of this. On April 1st, 2020, my husband and I moved to Moncton and bought a charming Victorian home on Church Street. At first, we thought we knew the area well, having lived downtown several years back. But once we settled in, we quickly realized how serious the homeless situation had become during the pandemic. But our biggest disappointment by far was finding out that the house 2 doors down from ours, operating under the name Leah Jane's Bed and Breakfast, was a brothel where several homeless people would gather. This was in combination with drug transactions, the sale of stolen goods, and several other unlawful activities. During our first year on Church Street, we witnessed too many horrible events: violent fights, screaming and partying through the night, gunshots, verbal abuse from the residents, drug use and transactions in our backyards, stealing and stripping bikes for metal and other items too numerous to mention. The situation required almost daily interventions from the Kodiak RCMP detachment, the Moncton Fire Department, paramedics, and others. We literally feared for our lives. Our neighborhood had now become hell on Church Street. Following months of intense drug policing, investigations and inspections carried out by the RCMP, SCAN, the local fire department, and the city of Moncton, Leah Janes was officially shut down. A few months later, the house was finally sold. But we were still very worried about who would be the next owner and what would this old neglected property become. When the news finally came out, the entire neighborhood was shocked to find out that a nonprofit organization had bought it. Later on, we learned that Rising Tide Community Initiatives was the new owner and that their objective was to transform the place into a homeless transition residence. There's no word to describe our reaction. We literally lost it. Some people were ready to sell their property in which they had invested so much. Unfortunately, some neighbors moved away because they just could not face the possibility of living this nightmare twice. My husband and I chose to stay. However, we took every opportunity to voice our frustrations, fears, and concerns regarding the project. We eventually met with city officials and requested a meeting to find out more about the project. Once the major home renovations were completed at the site, we and several concerned neighbors were invited to visit the facility and meet with members of the support team. We met some of the new residents who were so grateful to have, for the first time in a long while, clean and comfortable quarters of their own. Not only a beautiful home to live in, but a team of counselors and professionals to support and guide them through their rehabilitation. It's at that moment that we realized that this project had so much potential. Today, life in our small neighborhood is peaceful and enjoyable. The house, 2 doors down, has never been more beautiful, and its occupants more grateful for the opportunity they have been given. Now to finally see the light at the end of the tunnel and a path to a more rewarding life. To Rising Tide and partners, I wish nothing but the very best of luck and success in their future endeavors to provide a better future to the many vulnerable homeless and less fortunate members of our community. To those who are apprehensive about having this type of project in your area, I can truthfully say, having witnessed it firsthand, that the Rising Tide Initiative is done in a most sensitive and productive manner. There are metrics around calls from first aid and police departments and such. Calls to that neighborhood in 1 year went down 97%. 97%. Rising Tide received an award 2 years ago for this, and after the fact they realized this, and I really appreciate this. Not only did they restore a building, they restored residents, and they restored the neighborhood. This can be done. It can be done. That's what I call YIMBYism. I'm going to talk a little bit more about non-market housing, or again, the housing continuum that you saw earlier. So from shelters to affordable rental housing. I just want to give a little bit of background into non-market housing. All of those pictures there are non-market housing, either nonprofit or co-op housing units in New Brunswick. Don't look too bad. This is a Rising Tide property in Moncton. The reason I'm sharing this is twofold. Number one, I had the privilege of designing and building this, which was a lot of fun. We have an idea in September, 15 months later, there were people living in there. In 15 months, we went, geez, we got an idea, people are living in there. The other reason I'm sharing this is that front unit at the top. This is a 16-unit building, average about 320 to 350 square foot per unit. The unit at the top front has the most windows, and it's the largest, and we jokingly called it during construction the penthouse, because it's the nicest one in there. When we got the place finished, I said to the Rising Tide folks, I'd like to meet someone after they've lived here for a few months to find out what impact that had on their life. That was Jamie Wilson. Jamie lives in the penthouse. Here he is again.
I didn't think there was any help for me. I didn't ever think there was a chance.
Feel so far away from your home.
But after a lifetime of drug addiction and homelessness, Jamie Wilson's life song of turmoil and heartbreak is slowly changing its tune.
Don't know how to.
Born into a life of drug addiction,
My stepdad was a drug dealer. My other stepdad was a drug dealer. So I have a lot of, those were my role models. You want to ease the pain, send the poison through your vein.
Jamie became an addict and a dealer at only 13 and spent much of his early and adult years in and out of jail, couch surfing with no real home.
I never had a home until this now, really.
Now living in this one-bedroom apartment provided by Rising Tide Community Initiatives in Moncton, for the first time maybe ever, he feels like he can stand strong.
Like the thing is, it's my home. I don't have to share with nobody. I don't have to have nobody sleeping over, and the rules kind of help me.
With the help of wraparound supports that go along with settling into his new affordable apartment.
For the first while, it's so good to have like the caseworker helping you out and to have like the Rising Tide looking out for you.
Jamie has managed to stay clean for going on 3 years now, with his own bed to sleep in at night. He's gone from dealer to peer support worker at Harvest House Shelter, helping others get off the streets and the hard drugs for good.
I'm a peer. I'm just like them, except I got clean.
Working tirelessly behind the scenes, housing support workers like Kelsey Ivany have been working with Rising Tide to move more than 100 people in Moncton living rough into clean, modest apartments like this one.
The move-in days are always the best days that we have. You know, seeing people that are coming from shelter or who are sleeping rough, it's pretty cool to see, and you know, the smiles on their faces usually never goes away.
It's a transition that does not come easy, but worth the effort, says Jamie.
Got my own bed. Every night I sleep, so it's like a good routine. It's quiet. It's safety. My mental health is a lot better. The best part is just the quietness, the peacefulness.
He's now feeling for possibly the first time in his life. Shelley Steves, CHCO-TV.
A lot of Jamies out there. There's a lot of Jamies out there. Call to action. So it's one thing to stand here and me do this for 45 minutes or an hour and to sit there and listen to me. But if we don't move the needle or make any changes in what we do to help make a difference, then this is for naught. And I hope that you've been motivated somewhat to actually do something to make a difference. What I'd like you to do now, which is unusual in a presentation, is take out your cell phone. Come on, whip it out. I know you'll have one. Those in the last 2 or 3 rows, you might have to put 3 times on your phone. I'd like you to scan that QR code on the right-hand side of the screen. It will be there for a few minutes. And again, if you're in the back 2 or 3 rows, you might have to zoom in a bit. I'm going to share 6 things that you may choose to do or not. It's completely up to you. It's your choice to get engaged. First of all, Neighborhood Works and Charlotte County Housing Council were here earlier. I hope that you pledge or take action to donate to both of those organizations. They are wonderful organizations. That QR code will link you to a page associated with this presentation to follow up later on that. So, number 1, you're going to pledge to donate to Neighborhood Works. Number 2, purchase a 50/50 ticket from Charlotte County Housing Council. Number 3, so although we are the New Brunswick Nonprofit Housing Association, our plan is to organize presentations like this across the country. The New Brunswick Nonprofit Housing Association is a member of the Canadian Alliance of Nonprofit Housing Associations, which is essentially our counterparts in every province across Canada, except for Newfoundland and Labrador and PEI. We meet every 2 months and compare notes and have an annual conference. So we're creating a Facebook page specific to housingaction.ca, Let's Solve the Housing Crisis. If you want to follow us on Facebook, there'll be a link there through the QR code. We just started 2 weeks ago a LinkedIn group. So from a professional perspective, if you want to get engaged with the New Brunswick Nonprofit Housing Association, there's a link to our LinkedIn page there as well on number 4. Number 5, which I'll go through in a couple of minutes, I'm announcing tonight that a group of organizations and individuals, there's about 10 of us in total, have collaborated, and we just got this done today, so you're the first ones to see this. We have written a letter to the Premier and 6 cabinet ministers who will be receiving this tomorrow to let them know what we will do in the nonprofit sector to support getting more affordable housing built. And I'll go through those bullet points on the next slide. Also, just as importantly, if you want to contact me for whatever reason, my contact information is there if you don't have it already. First of all, again, our intent is to grow the number of people doing these presentations. If you're interested and would like to do this, let me know. That's a link to my email. So that's number 1. Number 2, we are building a pool of advisors, an advisory committee for the association. I've found in the last probably 2 or 3 months in having conversations like this, I've had friends and colleagues from around the province who reached out to me and said, what can I do to help? So we're building up a group of individuals, mostly people that are semi-retired or retired, who have great experience either in finance or architecture or engineering, project management, who are saying, what can I do to help? So if you want to get a hold of me for that reason, please do. If you have any further questions and such, please get a hold of me as well. So those are the 6 actions. Again, you just went through the experience here. So what I'd like to do as well is you'll notice at the bottom of your phone, you'll see a pledge list button that goes to a little survey. Please let me know, and you don't have to submit your name if you do not want to, but what I'm curious to find out is how many of you will actually pledge to do one of these actions. And before we leave this room, I'm going to let you know how many people said they will do something. It's on my iPad right behind here. So this letter to the Premier and Cabinet Ministers. So some of you may have read them or not, but the new Premier gave mandate letters to all of the new Cabinet Ministers in the fall. And I know this is a little small print, but there's a letter that we are releasing today, actually tonight. We're working with several other organizations, from construction organizations, the University of New Brunswick Offsite Construction Research Center, other nonprofits, a few other organizations. We're signing a letter collectively to the Premier and 6 cabinet ministers to say, we're ready, willing, and able to work with you to address the housing crisis in New Brunswick. So we're ready to work on that. This provincial government has committed to building 30,000 new homes in the next 5 years. So about 6,000 per year. One of the things we like to see is that no less than 20% of those homes are nonprofit or community housing units, or about 1,200 units per year. So we'd like to see a commitment of 1,200 new units per year. That's the second bullet point. We'd like to see a longer funding profile, meaning we'd like to know that we've got a 5-year funding window and not year-to-year funding. We'd like to see a what's called a Build New Brunswick Social Bond, or basically, 2 pieces of that. Number 1 is the provincial government providing financial support for housing, and we can talk about that at the Q&A session, but there is a financial payback for the taxpayer for this funding model. Speed up the building process. We'd like to see more progress there with respect to zoning and process improvements. Sharing best practices around the province, supporting modular housing, and we've seen this for decades now, upskilling New Brunswickers to address the labor needs. We all know what it's like to find a carpenter, a plumber, or such. We need more people out in the field, big time. So we're ready, willing, and able to work with this government to get that work done, and this will be included in a letter that will be sent to the Premier and those cabinet ministers in the next 24 hours. If you want to put your signature on that after reading it, please do. It's on a website where you can just type in your name. So we're launching that tonight. Now to get really depressing, if we fail collectively, I've got 5 pictures here. The private sector, how many people still have a BlackBerry?
Oh, I can't.
Sorry. I knew that was coming. You caved, didn't you?
I still got an Etch-a-Sketch.
No, right. Right on. If we fail, you look at companies like BlackBerry, right? I know they're in other sectors now, but no one has BlackBerry today. They failed. Apple came out with the iPhone, they're done in the smartphone sector. They failed. If we fail with climate crisis, that's a picture of a house on fire in LA, and I think most of you probably know what that picture is in the middle and the top. That's the Point St. Andrews. If we fail, we're going to see more and more of that. We have to do more work to address the climate crisis. If we fail with the housing crisis, we're going to have more photographs like that on that side of the screen. Right now, in Fredericton, St. John, and Moncton combined, there are 1,500 people living on the street in those 3 cities. 1,500. How many people were living on the street in those 3 cities 5 years ago? It wasn't that many. We have a lot of work to do. We cannot fail at this. We need to work together to address the housing crisis. Thank you. I'm finished. Thank you. Thank you. That ends the presentation part. Now I'm going to play that video again that lists the credits. There have been a lot of people involved in getting this presentation put together. I would like to give them credit. So we're going to play this video one more time with the names. And I'd like you to read all the names of the people that have been involved to get this. It's not a one-person show. There's been at least 50 people that have participated in this process. So I'd like you to read through those names. You may know some of them. And after that, we'll open the floor to a question and answer period. There's a mic over here. So please take 3 minutes to read those names, and then we'll open the floor up. Thank you.
Stories is in with a little bit of shit. She's telling you how her life is on her. She is reminiscing how fun it was. Yeah, the light has disappeared, leaving place to the dark. She has a worst feeling deep inside, hoping for the best of the land she loves. Yeah, dressed in the same robe, just like the same world, working at the same goal. You're calling her full over the right times, dressed in the same role, just like one world, carrying the same goal. Stop calling her for being happy. There gotta be a way to make it better. Gotta be a way for better. There gotta be a way to be less anger. It's getting to a point to build together. Quand je l'écoute et prends enfin conscience de ces mots, on peut y voir des cas désespérants, et peut y voir des cas encourageants. Yeah. Une parabole qui s'érige au-delà de ces mots. Elle croit encore positivement, met en œuvre tout ce qu'elle a entièrement. Yeah. Vêtue de colère, confronter la mer, faire face aux galères. Impossible n'aura plus d'emprise sur elle. Vêtue de colère, offrir un délai, faire face aux galères. Impossible n'aura plus d'emprise sur elle. There gotta be a way to make it better. There gotta be a way for better. There gotta be a way to be less anger. Getting to a point to build together. to build together, to build together.
A lot of good people on that screen. So for those that have shared their pledges so far, I just want to share the results so far. 90% said they would donate to Neighborhood Works. Thank you. About 85% said they're going to contribute to the 50/50 fund. Everyone that responded said they're going to follow us on Facebook. That's easy, that's just a follow. About 50% of you will join our LinkedIn group. 95% said you're going to follow or sign that letter to the minister and the cabinet, to the premier and the cabinet ministers. And about half of you are going to get a hold of me later to have a chat. So thank you very much for all that. I really appreciate that. Follow up. Please do follow up. Thank you. All right, I've done all the talking for an hour. And anyway, there's supposed to be another slide that says Q&A, question and answer. So we've got a few minutes. If anyone has a question, comment, would like to share something, please go to the mic. Do not be shy. Anyone? Uh-oh. Robert's going first.
So my question is around, and this doesn't apply to everybody, there's every category on the housing list, but of the people that are on the housing list, what has government done in terms of offering, even on a voluntary basis, very basic things like resume writing, positive living, interpersonal skills, problem solving, budgeting, some very basic, important things in life that is needed, parenting. What we have found in the nonprofit housing sector, we're family housing, so we see a lot of the results of these things early on, is that children mirror the behaviors of their parents. So if we're not doing something to assist the parents and offer them some resources to move their lives forward, where we are at today is the end result of that. We're seeing social workers stressed to the max. We're seeing any income assistance case manager that you talk to privately will tell you that the system is broken. We're seeing police forces that are beyond what they're able to deal with. We're seeing crime rate that's up. So if we are in this position today because we have not offered those resources, where are we going to be in 10 years? So we have to break the cycle, because remember that housing retention is also one factor in breaking the homelessness issue, because they didn't become homeless just because it landed. You might find that a number of them have already been in a number of housing situations, but weren't able to retain it because they lacked some of those basic life skills that were necessary.
Thank you. Robert's being humble. Last year at our annual conference, we presented Robert with our Innovation Award for the year for the work that you were doing in that context. Robert's helping residents at Charlotte County Housing go through that kind of training with support from the provincial government through post-secondary education, training, labor. Thank you. He had a graduation. I came down for the graduation and cut the cake. I did. I think that's a fantastic program. Right now, we as an association are working towards scaling what you've done up in St. Stephen around the province. And they're listening to us to take that kind of work right across the province. So I'd like to thank you, Robert, for leading the way on that in New Brunswick. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? Yes, sir.
Could I speak for a couple minutes on a couple?
You absolutely can, but you do need the mic so everyone can hear you.
All right, thank you.
100%.
I listened to a couple things as an addict, and when I was out on the streets with Robert's, there was one aspect that has changed, but it drove the numbers up, was income assistance only allowed one person on income assistance in a household. So that drove people out onto the streets because a person that was on income assistance wouldn't allow another person because they would lose their income assistance. That's how it started. It's not one aspect. But I know for a fact, several houses that I couch surfed was directed by you. And I know that to this day that there's several people living in a house with 2 bedrooms with not those bedrooms occupied. So it's not just one factor. It's many factors. Yeah. Policing, no consequence. But ultimately, the problem is the people are homeless. It's not how they become out on the streets. It's why did they come out on the streets, and it's because of traumas or whatever. So be it. There's many factors, and there was another question I wanted to ask you is, I know for years as I was in my addiction, I was homeless. I got put on a housing list, and it was big. And I kept calling to see where I was on the list. Has those numbers changed from 6 years ago till now? That list that people are waiting.
Has that number changed? Are you ready for this? It has more than doubled. It has more than doubled since 2019. 2019, 2020, that list was about 5,000 people. Today, it's at about 12,000 people in New Brunswick are waiting for housing in New Brunswick. It's more than doubled in 5 years. We are truly challenged to get more affordable housing built. And like I said, every one of us can make a difference with that. We're working closely with the provincial government, but the more people that get involved and engaged can help make a difference. And I hope there's some value in what we discussed tonight to help motivate some people in this room to actually make a difference, because if there's no value in what we did right now, I might as well go home. This gentleman, then Jim, thank you.
This is a quick question, I hope. A news story that I've heard about in Fredericton, and the story goes that a millionaire is building tiny homes. Can you comment on that?
Absolutely. Marcel Lebrun, Marcel Lebrun did well. He sold his company called Radiant 6 about 7 or 8 years ago for about $600 million. I don't know what percentage of that business he had, but even if it was 10%, that's still $60 million. So whatever number it is, good on Marcel. His company sold to Salesforce. He spent 5 years ensuring a smooth transition from Radiant 6 to Salesforce. After that 5 years was up, he kind of looked in the mirror and said, okay, what purpose can I bring to society? He decided that he was going to focus on addressing homelessness. He took it upon himself to go to San Francisco, Winnipeg, Vancouver, Portland, Charlotte, I think one other city. He spent time with those unhoused people in those cities to really learn what's going on. About 2.5 years ago, he purchased 96 acres in Fredericton on the north side, beside where the Walmart and such is on the north side of Fredericton. And he said, I'm going to build 96 tiny homes. They're 190 square feet each. When he started, most people were wondering, what is this guy doing? About 2.5 years later, he's got the 96 built. And not only has he built these, they've created a social enterprise center. So it's a building that's, I don't know, I'm going to guess about 10,000 square feet. And in that building, they've got one heck of a coffee shop where the residents and 12 neighbors can work in there. So they're actually serving coffee, and it's a very busy coffee shop. For the entrepreneurs that live at 12 neighbors, if you want to do like t-shirts or art and such, there's a place to actually sell the artwork. So there's a place to learn skills serving coffee and such. There's a place to share your entrepreneurial endeavors. And they're also starting to build these homes there as well. What I really like about what they've done, and I've talked to Marcel about this a number of times, they really put a lot of effort into the physical design of the space. And the reason it's called 12 Neighbors is because if you look at it, like especially if you go to their website and you see like drone shots of it, you'll see short rows of 6 houses and 6 houses and 6 houses. So it's designed so it's not one long street. So you go sit out on your deck and you talk to your neighbor there, there, and there, and there, and there. And they're even the way they're placed actually has an impact on the quality of life as well. So I think they've done a really good job. That is one model. So again, Fredericton had the benefit of a gentleman who could bring a lot of money to the table. In Moncton, I mentioned Rising Tide a few times. Slightly different approach to the same challenge. At Rising Tide, they've got 153 units roughly now, where they're distributed throughout the city. So that building I showed you with 16 units, that was finished 2 years ago. Since then, they've actually built 8 other buildings that are 8 units like that are cookie cutter design, same design on the same lot, typical building lot in Moncton, and you'll see them all around Moncton. So there are 8 units now, 4 upstairs and 4 downstairs. So that model, slightly different thing, but that's happening in Moncton. St. John, you may have seen in the media recently that the United Way is looking to start a similar project in St. John. So hats off to all of them. Slightly different approach in each city, but at the same time they're providing value, and more importantly, in each model there are support services there for the residents in those communities. I hope that helped. Okay. Jim's turn.
Yes, so a little bit of that I'll piggyback on because I didn't mention it early because I only had 2 minutes. But
you took more than 2 minutes, my friend.
I know. I took Roberts, the rest of Roberts.
Now you're taking up way more. No, I'm kidding.
Yeah. So anyway, to talk about Roberts and or what Robert's talking about, and the same way as NB Housing and those kind of lists. So a lot of and why I talk about housing first, I was fortunate enough to go to Niagara when a bunch of the people in the province who were setting up out of the colds and that sort of stuff was able to go. So I went out to Niagara, and they chose Niagara because Niagara has like 12 kind of municipalities similar to New Brunswick. The area of Niagara is also similar to the population of New Brunswick. And the year that we were out there, which was the year before last, they were no longer needing out of the colds. They were in their 10 years of planning that they had enough housing and shelters, because some people are still going to live in shelters. Some people are still going to live in encampments because that's what they're going to choose to do. And every human being, every adult has the right to choose where they should be. So what I want to say to that, some of our individuals need to learn to live in space again. Particularly the homeless, and that's where I'm coming. So when I talked about, and I think if Kathy's still here and Alan's still here, we had a conversation with the Premier about purchasing land and developing supportive housing on. Neighborhood Works has the land. We currently have plans, and it's before housing right now, hopefully, and with some of the stuff that you talked about in the letter today, that St. Stephen will be able to have 15 one-bedroom tiny homes to help with individuals that are homeless, have the supports that they require. Part of our transitional housing, part of what we're doing with our homeless hub will be to teach our specific population those skills that they've had and lost over time because of chronic homelessness. And we also know that we need to work with diversion. So when someone walks into our house and they've been unhoused, and it's like, oh, you were just unhoused yesterday. We have outreach workers that can work with those individuals and say, why are you here? We want you out of shelter as quickly as possible. We also know that those that are recently unhoused are the easiest to rehouse. Those that are chronically unhoused continue to be unhoused. So again, what you're saying, and to your point, we have to flip that script as to you can still be an addict and live in a house. We need to support you in that house, and whether that is someone who, we talk about shopping carts and everyone gets really upset about all the shopping carts. Some people want to call them people's treasures or whatever, but that's okay. They are stuff that people need. It is important to them. But again, if you don't have a blanket and it rained that night and you have one in the bag, you throw your blanket out. It is no longer used. You can't dry it, you can't wash it. You have another one in the bag, and that's why we get all of these encampments and all the stuff that's around the encampments, because people are just trying to survive. The point that I'm really trying to make is about that, is about the housing first, that everyone deserves housing, and we deserve to. So we'll say, someone can come in and say, you can't have so-and-so in your house, right? If we put people into NB housing, our people are not going to be able to survive in NB housing because of the rules. They certainly cannot house, and this is no way against anybody, because they haven't learned the skills you should talk about to be able to stay in yours. So we're hoping through transitional housing, whether it's these 15 apartments, that they'll have the skills to be able to then live in your apartments or regular apartments. So nothing's there yet. We hope that everyone continues to support as they have been. But like I said, Alan and Kathy knows that this was supposed to have already happened, and it hasn't, and we'll continue to fight to make it happen. Thank you.
All right. On that note, I hope there was value here tonight. I hope that everyone here takes at least some action towards making an improvement. And on that, thank you very much, and thank you for coming out. I really appreciate it. Thank you.